My husband's family never accepted me. Not when we got married, not when I became pregnant, and certainly not at our baby shower, when his sister raised her glass and said, "Let's hope the kid looks like him." Everyone laughed like I was some outsider crashing their perfect bloodline. I just smiled and stayed silent. But the silence did not last long, because 1 week later, at the will reading of the family patriarch, the lawyer looked around the room at all their smug faces and said, "The entire estate goes to her." You could hear the breath leave their bodies. Suddenly, no one was laughing, and they had no idea what else I knew. My name is Rachel Monroe. I am 29 years old, and this is not the life I dreamed of. I grew up in a modest home in Charleston, South Carolina. My mother was a teacher, my father a mechanic. We never had much, but there was always warmth, always laughter. That was the kind of love I expected when I married into the Walker family. I could not have been more wrong. I met Ethan Walker when I was 25. He was 32, charming, wildly intelligent, and so polished he made everyone else in the room fade into the background. We met at a charity art auction, one of those events where everyone pretends to care about the cause, but really just wants to outbid their enemies. I had gone with a friend. He was standing by the sculpture of a deconstructed phoenix, sipping white wine and looking bored. We locked eyes. He smiled, and just like that, my life began to orbit his. Ethan came from old money, the kind of wealth that did not just buy cars and vacations. It bought silence, influence, entire buildings with names carved in stone. His family owned a string of luxury hotels across the East Coast, passed down from his grandfather, Charles Walker Sr., who had built the empire from the ground up after the war. The Walkers were royalty in their own circles, and Ethan was the crown prince. But fairy tales lie. His mother, Judith Walker, was the first to make her disapproval known. She smiled with her lips, but not her eyes. Her gaze always hovered near my hands, my shoes, my coat labels. She asked where I studied, then nodded vaguely when I said the University of South Carolina, like she had never heard of it. She would always say things like, "Rachel has such energy," with a tone that made it sound more like a disease than a compliment. His sister, Miranda, was worse. Cold and calculated, always dressed like she had a stylist on retainer. She never spoke to me unless it was to correct something, or to throw in a line like, "You are so brave for wearing that color," or, "My Pilates instructor has a dog named Rachel, so cute." Still, Ethan never spoke ill of them. He loved his family. He asked me to try, so I tried. I swallowed their snide comments, ignored their stares at holidays, endured dinners where I might as well have been the waitress. I thought if I loved Ethan enough, eventually they would learn to love me too. When I became pregnant, I thought things would change. Ethan was thrilled, maybe even more than I was. He began talking about baby names, nursery paint colors, family vacations we would take once the baby arrived. He held me every night like I was made of glass. I could tell he was nervous about becoming a father, but he was ready. I could see it in the way he would rest his hand on my stomach absent-mindedly while reading or watching TV. Then came the baby shower. Judith insisted on hosting it. She said it would be a family affair, that she wanted to welcome the baby properly. I should have known it was a trap. The entire Walker family was there. Judith in pearls, Miranda in white, cousins and aunts, and people I had only ever seen in real estate brochures. They brought gifts wrapped in gold ribbon, silver rattles that cost more than my rent, baby clothes so expensive I would be afraid to let the child wear them. But not a single card had my name on it. Every gift was addressed to Baby Walker or Ethan and family. I was invisible in my own celebration. Then Miranda raised her champagne glass. "Here is to the baby," she said, smiling wide. "Let us all hope the child looks like Ethan." The room laughed. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at her, then at Ethan. He was laughing too. He stopped when he saw my face, but the damage had already been done. I said nothing. I just kept smiling. I would not let them see me break. Not now. Not ever. What none of them knew was that 3 days earlier, Charles Walker Sr. had passed away in his sleep, and the reading of the will was scheduled for next week. What they also did not know was that I had been visiting him every Thursday for the past 2 years. We had tea. We talked about his hotels, about his regrets, about Ethan, about life. He liked that I listened. I liked that he talked. He once told me, "Rachel, you are the only real one in a house full of masks." I thought it was just a sweet compliment from an old man, but now I was starting to think it had been a warning. The morning of the will reading, the sky was the color of steel. A soft drizzle fell over the Walker estate, as if the heavens themselves wanted to dull the edges of what was coming. I wore a black dress, simple and clean, and tied my hair back in a low knot. Ethan asked if I was sure I wanted to go. I looked him straight in the eye and said I would not miss it. The room was full when we arrived. The family gathered like vultures around a fresh kill. Judith sat at the head of the table, her posture unbending, a diamond brooch glinting coldly on her collar. Miranda stood by the window, texting someone with a look of impatient victory. Cousins and uncles nodded at each other with smug anticipation. They all knew Charles Walker Sr. had left a fortune. They had been circling it for years. The lawyer, a man named Gregory Phelps, arrived precisely at 10. He was tall and thin, with sharp features, and a briefcase he guarded like a newborn child. After greeting the room, he placed a single thick envelope on the table and cleared his throat. "This is the final will and testament of Charles Edwin Walker Sr., he began. Signed, witnessed, and notarized 4 months before his passing. Judith gave a tiny confident smile. Miranda was already scrolling on her phone again. Gregory continued, "Per the instructions of the deceased, I will read the contents aloud, word for word." The room fell into a hush. Everyone leaned forward slightly. "To my daughter, Judith Walker," Gregory read, "I leave the beach house in Nantucket and the 1968 Bentley. I trust these will remind her of simpler times and perhaps encourage her to find joy in people, not things." Judith blinked. That was it? "To my granddaughter Miranda," he continued, "I leave the art collection in the East Wing. She always did enjoy staring at beautiful things she would never understand." A few people coughed. Miranda turned sharply toward Gregory. "What?" she said, almost inaudibly. Gregory did not stop. "To my various grandchildren, nephews, and business partners, I leave the sum of $50,000 each. Use it wisely or do not. I will not be around to scold you." Judith's mouth was a hard line now. Miranda had gone pale. Gregory looked up from the page, adjusted his glasses, and said, "The remainder of the estate, including the primary residence, all remaining assets, trust accounts, investments, and full controlling interest in Walker Hospitality Group, is to be inherited by Rachel Monroe Walker." The room imploded. At first, there was only silence, like someone had ripped the oxygen out of the air. Then came the voices, high, sharp, stammering. "That is not possible. This is a joke. She is an outsider." I remained seated, calm, hands folded in my lap. Ethan turned to me, his face a blur of confusion and shock. "Did you know about this?" he whispered. I looked at him carefully. "No, I only knew he liked me." Gregory handed me a separate envelope. "He left this letter for you." I opened it with trembling fingers. "Rachel, if you are reading this, then I have finally done the only rebellious thing I had left. I chose you because you are kind, honest, and not afraid to speak when no one else will. This family has been rotting from the inside for decades. Maybe you can rebuild it, or maybe you will burn it down and start something better. Either way, I trust you. Charles." I folded the letter and slipped it into my bag. The room was still reeling. Miranda was demanding a DNA test. Judith stood up and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You manipulated him," she hissed. "You played nursemaid to an old man, and now you think you own us?" I stood up slowly. "I never asked him for a single thing. You were the ones circling like sharks." Ethan looked at me like he had never seen me before. Why did he choose you? It was a good question, but the answer was not something I was ready to share just yet. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I needed to be sure of what came next. That night, Ethan barely spoke to me. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders tight, phone glowing in his hand. Messages were flying in. The whole Walker circle knew now. By morning, the headlines had started. Walker matriarch bypassed for daughter-in-law. Outsider inherits billion-dollar hotel chain. But that was not the most surprising part, because 2 days later, I received an anonymous package at the door. Inside was a USB drive, and on that drive was a video. A secret that could destroy the entire Walker family and Ethan. And the person who filmed it was someone I had trusted. I stared at the USB drive in my palm, weighing almost nothing, yet it suddenly felt like it could crush an entire empire. The envelope had no return address, no note, nothing but that small silver device resting inside black tissue paper. My hands felt clammy as I slid it into my laptop and waited. A single file appeared on the screen. No title, just a timestamp. FEB14, EAMM4.MP4, Valentine's Day. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, likely security camera quality. It showed a dimly lit hallway, familiar wallpaper, those signature gold-trimmed sconces. It was one of the upper floors at Walker Grand Hotel, their flagship property in Manhattan. Ethan walked into frame. He was not alone. A woman clung to his arm, laughing drunkenly. She was young, in a red dress, heels wobbling. He kissed her neck. They disappeared into Suite 426. The hallway was empty again. The clip ended at the 32-second mark. My chest ached like someone had stepped on it. Not because I was shocked, but because I was not. Ethan had been distant for months. Even during the pregnancy, his warmth had felt manufactured, something he put on like a coat for special occasions. I had ignored it, telling myself he was stressed, overwhelmed, afraid of fatherhood. But deep down, I had known. What crushed me was the date. That night, Ethan had sent flowers to our home and told me he was stuck in Boston for work. I had eaten dinner alone. And now I was staring at the proof that it had all been a lie. I closed the laptop and sat perfectly still, not crying, not yelling, just thinking. Why had someone sent this to me now? Who had filmed it? Why now, after the will reading? I replayed the footage again. At the 5-second mark, something caught my eye. A shadow. Movement. In the lower corner of the screen, right before Ethan entered the frame, someone else had been there. Someone who knew exactly when to record. This had been no accident. I started to wonder if the inheritance had painted a bigger target on my back than I realized. That evening, I confronted Ethan. He was standing in the kitchen, reading emails on his phone. I placed the USB drive on the counter between us. He looked at it, then up at me. "What is that?" he asked. "Just watch it," I said. He plugged it into his laptop without another word. 32 seconds later, his face was the color of ash. "Rachel," he began, voice cracking, "I can explain." "Do not," I interrupted. "Do not insult me further." "It was before the baby shower," he whispered. "I know exactly what day it was," I replied. "And I also know that you chose her over your pregnant wife, so now I need you to choose again. Me or your legacy." He looked confused. "You think I care about money?" I said. "You think I stayed because of the inheritance?" "No, I stayed because I thought maybe, just maybe, you were better than your family, but you are exactly like them. Polished, privileged, empty." He tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. "I am keeping the house," I said, "and I am keeping the company, but I am done with you." I walked out before he could speak again. That night, as I lay in bed in one of the guest rooms, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The video was just the beginning. You need to see what they are planning next. Do not trust Ethan or Miranda." Attached was a photo. It showed Miranda sitting in a cafe across from someone I recognized instantly. Ethan's ex-girlfriend, Zoe. The woman he had left 6 years ago. The one who had once told me at a gala, "You are just the placeholder." Now, she was back, and clearly, she was working with Miranda. I zoomed into the image. In the corner of the table sat a large manila envelope. On it, bold black letters, Operation Reclaim. And under that, a list of names. Mine was circled. I stared at my name, circled in red ink like a target on a dartboard. Operation Reclaim. The phrase clung to my thoughts like a bad taste. There was no doubt anymore. This was not just about money or jealousy. It was a full-blown plan. And I was the enemy. I saved the photo and deleted the message. Whoever had sent it did not follow up. I had no name, no contact, just that single digital breadcrumb. But I had enough. I could feel the walls around me beginning to shift. The Walker family was not used to losing, and they were not going to take it quietly. The next day, I called a private investigator. His name was Marcus Rowe. Retired NYPD, clean record, discreet reputation. I asked him to start digging into Miranda, Zoe, and Ethan. He nodded, said nothing, and began his work. He did not ask questions. That was why I hired him. Meanwhile, Ethan began showing signs of desperation. He stayed in the house, lingered around the hallways, tried to run into me during meals. He offered to talk, to go to therapy, even offered to step down from the board to make things right. I listened, but I said nothing. Then came the board meeting. As the new majority shareholder, I was expected to make my first formal appearance at the Walker Hospitality Group quarterly review. Every major executive would be there, along with the investors. Ethan had once run those rooms. Now, I would. I walked in wearing a navy pantsuit. No frills, no statement jewelry, just purpose. Judith and Miranda were already seated. Their expressions tightened the moment they saw me. Ethan sat quietly in the far corner next to Zoe. Zoe. She should not have been there. I leaned to one of the board members. Who invited her? She is consulting for Miranda now, he whispered. I smiled. Not for long. The meeting began. Sales charts, profit margins, new construction delays. Then Miranda stood and introduced a new initiative. A full rebranding of all Walker properties under a new identity. She clicked to the presentation slide. Walker Lux, it read, in bold gold letters. She explained her vision of modernizing the brand, shifting away from the legacy Charles had built. No more tribute to family history, no more nods to classic luxury. This would be about Instagrammable experiences, neon signage, trendy rooftop bars. I let her finish. Then I stood. This direction is not only tone deaf, I said calmly. It is a betrayal of everything this company stands for. My husband's grandfather built this business on timeless value, not social media gimmicks. Judith raised her hand. You have no experience in this world, Rachel. Leave the decisions to people who do. I turned to her. You are right. I do not have experience pretending to care about legacy while stabbing it in the back, but I have something else. Control. I nodded to Marcus, who entered the room with a folder. This, I said, is a full report on unauthorized activity led by Miranda Walker and Zoe Andrews, leaked data, undisclosed investor conversations, plans to quietly remove me from the board using falsified claims of mental instability after the baby's birth. Gasps filled the room. Ethan's face turned sheet white. I opened the folder and began passing out copies. Also, I added, Zoe is not a consultant. She is a shareholder in a competing hospitality group, Black Ridge Resorts. Here are her ownership documents. Judith slammed her palm on the table. This is a lie. Marcus responded before I had to. We pulled the filings. Everything is real. Your daughter has been selling insider information to a direct competitor. The board murmured in anger. I stepped back and let the silence linger. The chair of the board cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Miranda Walker is suspended pending a full investigation. Zoe stood up to leave but tripped over her chair. No one helped her. Ethan did not move. As the room emptied, he approached me slowly. You destroyed her, he said. I turned to him. No, she destroyed herself. I just held up the mirror. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he turned and walked out instead. That night, Marcus called me. There is something else, he said. Something we did not expect. He paused. The video from Valentine's Day. It was not filmed by a hotel employee. It came from an encrypted camera planted inside the hallway by a private third party. I frowned. Who? We traced the signal. It came from Judith's estate. My blood turned cold. She was not trying to protect her son, Marcus said. She was documenting him. But why? I asked, more to myself. Because she never wanted you to leave him, he answered. She wanted you to stay, humiliated, stuck, broken, and she wanted insurance, just in case you ever fought back. I could not sleep that night. I lay awake with the soft hum of the baby monitor beside me, my hand resting on my stomach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Judith's face behind that camera. Not Ethan's betrayal, not Miranda's schemes, but hers. The woman who had looked at me like I was less than, smiled while slicing into me with words, and now secretly watched her own son in the act of cheating. I kept hearing Marcus's voice. She never wanted you to leave him. That kind of cruelty was more calculated than any of their social games or backhanded comments. That was something else entirely. The next morning, I asked Marcus to look deeper, not into Judith, but into Charles, the man who left me everything. If he had sensed this darkness, why had he let it grow under his roof? What had he known? What had he missed? The file came back within 24 hours, and what I found changed everything. There were payments, large ones, monthly deposits, all from a shadow company linked back to Walker Hospitality's discretionary fund. But the recipient was not a vendor. It was a person. Sarah Monroe, my mother. I sat frozen, staring at the bank records. Charles Walker had been sending money to my mother for almost 4 years before he died. Quiet, under-the-table sums, not enough to scream bribe, but too much to be charity. My hands trembled as I called her. "Mom," I said, barely breathing. "Why was Charles sending you money?" Silence. "Tell me." She finally sighed. "Rachel, I did not want you to ever find out like this." "Find out what?" I said, my throat tightening. "I knew Charles a long time ago, before you were born." My heart pounded. She continued, "I worked for him, years before I met your father. I was his assistant, and for a while, I was more than that." I gripped the edge of the table. "He was married," she said. "I ended it when I found out I was pregnant. I never told him, but years later, I did." The line went quiet again. "Rachel," she whispered, "Charles Walker was your biological father." I sat in silence, as if the ground had fallen out beneath me. Everything snapped into focus. Why he took an interest in me, why he said I was the only real one, why he had left the entire empire to me, because it was already mine. When I told Marcus, even he looked shaken. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked. "You are not just the daughter-in-law. You are the heir by blood." Judith knew. She probably found out after he updated the will. I felt a chill run down my spine, and she said nothing because she thought I would never find out. "She wanted you close," he said, "but powerless." Judith had tried to trap me in her family, then suffocate me with tradition and silence. But her mistake was underestimating how far I would go once I knew the truth. I decided it was time to confront her. I invited her to tea at the estate. She arrived 2 hours late, wearing a silk scarf and sunglasses, like she was returning from a battle she had already won. "You wanted to speak," she said coldly, taking a seat across from me. I poured the tea slowly. "Tell me, Judith, what was it like watching me marry your step-grandson, knowing full well who I truly was?" She blinked. Then she adjusted her sunglasses. "So you found out?" I nodded. "You knew I was Charles's daughter, and you stayed quiet. Why?" She looked me in the eye. "Because I believed he made a mistake, a moment of weakness with a woman who did not belong in our world. I thought you would crumble under the pressure. I thought you would run, but you stayed." "And now?" I asked. She sipped her tea. "Now you are the biggest threat this family has ever seen." I leaned forward. "I am not the threat. I am the consequence." For once, Judith was the one with nothing left to say. That evening, I held Charles's letter again and reread the final line. "Maybe you will burn it down and start something better." He had no idea just how right he was. The next few weeks moved like a silent war. Ethan stopped pretending. He left the house without explanation and started staying at one of the penthouses downtown. The tabloids said he was coping with the transition, but I knew better. His pride had fractured beyond repair. Once the image of control was gone, so was his charm. I was no longer his trophy. I was his threat. Miranda vanished from public appearances. She had not been formally charged yet, but board pressure mounted. Investors began pulling out of deals she was involved in. Every hour, another crack in the Walker dynasty split open, and I no longer cared to stop it, but I still had questions. The one thing that kept haunting me was the USB drive. If it had truly come from Judith's estate, who had sent it? Judith had no reason to arm me. Even if she hated her son, she hated me more. That piece of the puzzle was still loose. Until Marcus called again. "There is someone you need to meet," he said. "Someone from inside." He would not say more over the phone. We met at a private cafe on the Upper West Side. A woman was already seated when I arrived. Early 30s, black blazer, cautious eyes. Marcus introduced her as Dana. She had been Charles Walker's personal nurse. Dana explained that she had been there the day he drafted the new will, that he had insisted on doing it while he was still clear-minded, healthy enough to mean every word. She had been one of the two witnesses, but she had also been more than that, a confidant. "Charles knew he was surrounded by vipers," Dana said. "He told me you were the only one who listened, the only one who never tried to manipulate him." She hesitated, then slid me a small envelope. "This is from him. He gave it to me a week before he died. He said I would know when to pass it along." My fingers shook slightly as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and an old photograph. The note read, "Rachel, if the family ever turns on you, if they ever make you question who you are or why you are here, show them this." The photo was black and white, weathered but unmistakable. A younger Charles Walker, arms wrapped around a woman. My mother. She was pregnant. Her hand was on her stomach. On the back of the photo, written in Charles's signature scrawl, "My blood, my legacy. She does not need their name. She is mine." I felt the tears prick at my eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Validation. After everything they tried to erase, cover, belittle, I finally had the proof. Not legal proof, emotional proof, real proof. The next day, I made a decision. I called a press conference. I stood on the steps of Walker Tower, the flagship hotel Charles had built with his bare hands. Reporters swarmed, microphones everywhere, questions firing from every direction. I looked into the crowd and spoke clearly. "My name is Rachel Monroe Walker. I was born Rachel Monroe, but I am the biological daughter of Charles Walker. I am not just the wife of Ethan Walker. I am not just the inheritor of this legacy. I am the legacy." The crowd went still. "I will not rebrand Walker Hospitality. I will restore it. I will not hide the truth to protect the pride of people who never protected me. From this moment forward, I will lead this company with transparency, vision, and a memory of where it truly began. Not with Judith or Miranda or Ethan, but with a man who saw worth in someone the world tried to dismiss." Behind me, the massive digital sign flashed. Walker Legacy, Est, 1972. Rebuilt 2025. The headlines exploded the next morning. DNA confirmed, Rachel Walker is Charles's secret heir. From outsider to CEO, the woman who took back an empire. But it did not end there. 3 days later, I received an envelope at my office. It was unmarked. Inside was a single note. "You may have the company, Rachel, but the baby, that is still ours." No name, no signature, but I recognized the handwriting. It was Miranda's. I immediately called security, doubled staff at the estate, and filed a restraining order. But the message was clear. They were not finished, and neither was I. Because now, I was no longer playing defense. Now, I was ready to build something that could never be taken. Not just a hotel empire, but a legacy. My way. And that was just the beginning of how I took back everything they tried to bury. From the humiliation at my baby shower to uncovering secrets that rewrote the family legacy. I never expected to become the center of the storm, but sometimes life pushes you to become the version of yourself they were hoping would stay silent. If this story had you hooked, if you felt that twist coming or were completely shocked by the truth, make sure to subscribe right now. You will not want to miss the next chapter, because this family, they are not done yet, and neither am I. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me for more real-feeling stories filled with secrets, betrayal, and shocking revenge that hits where it hurts. Thanks for watching.